you have any questions to the applicant team?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I've got a few. I'm happy to ask one, and then if you wish to go to someone else, or I can keep going.
Just to keep going, I'm happy for you to keep going.
Sure. Look, it was just around the comment about the additional bays that are being provided for the bonus floor. And I was just interested in that table because I understand it's one bonus floor, but if we look at the height in meters, it's about, I think, 36 meters above what the as of right allowance is, which to my mind, even if we're generous with the number of meters per floor, that's effectively an additional 9 stories, even if they're not actual stories. So I just wondered, have you analysed the number or the average number of public bays provided, per additional metre rather than simply per story, given that can be a bit misleading?
Do either of you want to respond to that? Yes.
In response to your question or what you said, Council, no, it hasn't been contemplated the way you've put it. I think that where my presentation or deputation is concerned, it provided a direct response in many respects to the content of the city's director's letter, where there was a great emphasis posed or presented in relation to stories vis-a-vis public parking bays provided on site. So the direct comparison hasn't been made. Where the additional height that you refer to is concerned, I think for me and our team, the irony to an extent is that we are on a landmark corner where the building that sits adjacent is 22 stories in height. They have provided public parking at around the 7 bays per floor rate. But we do sit 7 stories, as I said, beneath that, where our height's concerned. So I think that height is really important on this site. When we met with the city's DRP on 2 occasions, they had no qualms with respect to height. And I think that is relevant. And that position, I believe, was very much informed by the fact that it is a landmark corner where we are chasing a little bit of extra height, if that is supported.
Thank you. Are there any? We'd like to continue, Deputy Mayor Matthew Woodall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Look, just in relation to that comparison as well with those other developments, I appreciate that there is, additional height for some of those others beyond what you're seeking. But I think in the case of a number of those, there are also other community benefits that they're providing, such as, community meeting spaces, community library, public change rooms and toilets and whatnot. So I guess looking at the application, it wasn't obviously clear to me, apart from the public parking, what really were the community benefits that were being provided. Are there significant other community benefits apart from the public parking?
Would the applicant like to respond?
Happy to respond to that. Look, what you've said is absolutely acknowledged where those other projects are concerned. In the RAR before us, the community benefits associated with this project are clearly articulated. I think what's relevant is this is not a community titled project. It is an office project. It's a commercial project where considerations are to be expected to be somewhat different. And I think, and I don't know if you're privy to it or whether or not you've seen it, but in responding to the city's inquiries regarding public parking on site prior to Christmas, I think it was the 23rd, we came back with an extensive list, in our opinion, as to where community benefit and uplift, if you like, might transpire if this project does get off the ground. And at this point in time, it might be really quite difficult to identify precisely, put a number to what those benefits amount to. But at the moment, we are looking at a location where there are high-rise buildings, all of which, it's my understanding, are residential in nature, and And what we are looking to bring to the location is something that's very much commercial. And I think that over the journey, the beauty of that, where community benefit comes about, we'll be seeing there will be uplift. I don't know if that email is present, but it was fairly extensive in terms of what this project can bring to the location where community benefits concerned, over and above the metrics that are currently in the planning framework. So we certainly hope that the panel acknowledges and receives that as a great opportunity for the area.
Would you like to continue speaking?
Yes, just one final question, if I may. Just around the condition 11 and the sort of two positions that are conflicting. On the one hand, there's, I believe, you consider that the 7 public parking bays is sufficient. The city's asking for, I think, all of the private bays to effectively be available to the public outside of business hours. I guess I'm just wondering, is there some sort of middle ground or compromise here? Someone who's worked in an office with underground parking for staff, most of those bays, not all, but most, sit completely empty outside business hours. Now, I don't know who the tenant is coming into your building, but I would hazard a guess that, at night after 6 p.m, there will be lots of empty bays. So is there not a way where some of these bays could be made publicly accessible? It just seems to me that effectively you're going to have all this parking that is effectively just wasted after hours when it could be used. There are examples elsewhere in the city of Melville where private businesses have private parking and they leave their car parks open after hours and the public can use them, and they don't attempt to restrict access. As far as I'm aware, there are no issues with traffic movement or anything of that nature, and when these are private business car parks. So I just put that out there, I guess, as a question as to whether there is some kind of sensible compromise here that could address sort of the concerns from both parties.
Would you like to make comment on that? Yes.
As I mentioned at the preface of my presentation, the objective today was to be as positive as possible where this project is concerned and how it might land on the subject land. I think what we need most importantly is a starting point, and to that end, this project has been taken very seriously by Vince and the project team, and equally by the city's planners. I have no qualms there at all, other than praise in terms of how the city's planners have gone about it. This change to condition 11 represented a fairly significant curveball for us. And when we met last Wednesday morning, it wasn't in the fix. Now it is. I think the 7 parking bays, if we can draw a parity to the other, to the table that's before us, and agree that the original condition 11 is something that we can work with. Only Vince has more intimate details of who the future tenants might look like and whether or not there is some scope for that to be entertained. But I think that we do need a starting point, and if we can get the application approved, condition 11 as originally presented, supported by the panel, and then I suspect that if that scope did materialise on the part of Vince and who he's looking to get onto the land, then we can certainly contemplate that. But I think at this point in time, we need certainty. It's a substantial project. It'll be the first substantial office project of scale in this location. We need to ensure that it's relatively de-risked from the outset.
Sorry, can I just ask a further on?
Yep.
I understand that, but if that original condition 11 is imposed, there's nothing to stop the landowner from simply saying, no, we're not going to put any additional parking above the 7, isn't that right?
There's nothing to stop the landowner from saying that, no. I've always found Vince to be and his family for that matter, very reasonable. I do a lot of their planning work. It's, as I said, we need a starting point on this. The parking layers as they've been presented or designed to a different standard. There's a host of considerations that need to be contemplated, and I do believe, and Vince, when we have these conversations and And I come back to Cam at the city. He's very frank with me that the office floor space and the parking bays on site will be attached to that floor space, and they are paid for by the future tenant. So to start negotiating or making an offer that can't be kept in advance of getting that tenant committing to the site is something that we can't do, I'm afraid.
Any further questions, Deputy Mayor? Shaking his head. Oh, no. Any further questions from online? Councillor Glenys Barber, do you have any questions to applicant's team?
Yeah, thanks, Francesca. It's Glenys, actually, not Glenys, but thank you.
Sorry,
I concur with a lot of the questions Deputy Mayor asked. I did think that Condition 11, the city had a parking management plan, but it perhaps wasn't very clear. And I do understand that this has come at a late moment to the proponents. But there are 3 levels, as I understand it, of car parking. And I guess my question was also along the lines of the Deputy Mayor, in that would it be feasible to have one of those levels or a compromise?
I don't know if I know. I would have to.
would you, is the applicant team able to make a response to that?
Yes, happy to respond.
I'll probably put in a technical response. The issue that we have is, from the outset, we've reviewed the car park design as an office commuter car park, and it wasn't in our briefing to look at the vehicle movements if it's used as a public car park. So I do think that the way it's being designed is fine for office commuter car parking, because the standard is more relaxed for that. But with public car parking, you do need more maneuvering space. You get more two-way traffic flows. I just have some concerns. Additionally, the width of the bays, you'd need them to be wider to be compliant. And you've also got a set column grid. So, there's substantial impacts if you wanted to make it compliant. And if you leave it as it is and open it to the public, then there's some complexities there that if someone does damage their vehicle and then they somehow identify that this is a non-compliant car park because the bays are too narrow, so who's legally liable and who are they going to take to court to get their car repaired? So there's some issues there. And this is something I've dealt with in SAT before, with who's responsible for non-compliant ramps and things like that. And I've been called out to a site where there was a ramp that was too steep and a staff member had scraped their car. And so there was a conflict between the employer and the employee. And then they ended up having to reprofile it because I measured the actual clearance of their car. It was compliant, and I measured on site the ramp grades. It was too steep, but then basically the operator was in the wrong. So I'm just thinking that it can open a can of worms here, that if there's damage to the building, damage to a column, because the spaces are too narrow for a public car park, then that it introduces another layer of complexity.
Thank you. Would the tenants have visitor parking in those any of those 3 levels for visitors to the offices?
That's something that we'll be dealing with in the parking management plan. But with visitor parking, you can pick the easiest bays to access, and it's not going to be a huge percentage of bays. So it
could be worked out. And also, I'm a bit concerned about the tenants, the ground floor tenants, because it hasn't been, it didn't look to me like there was demarcation for the 3 tenants on the ground floor and also the restaurant. So where are their visitors and clients going to park?
Councillor, when we met last Wednesday, we did discuss that. And it's a question of merit. We did speak about the basement level being the most suitable location for the operators that exist in those tenancies, given access to the service core, being only one level separating between that and the ground floor level, the ground floor plane. But as Paul just indicated, the conditions recommended for this application are extensive, and one of those is the requirement for the car parking management plan, which we would be working closely with the city to confirm these elements to it. If I can just go back to your former question, if that's all right, presiding member, and I'll, as I said, with respect to the relationship that I have with my client, I think if the proposition was put 12 months ago when we first commenced this process, that the parking on site be made available for public use, the response would have been a firm no. And if that requirement was to follow through, then we wouldn't be here today. So it is very late in the piece. It very much affects or impacts the ability to get the floor space away, whereby those car parking bays are attached to that, and they are paid for. So the expectation is they're available for 24/7 use.
So just on that point, so the 158 car bays on those 3 floors, none of them are earmarked for the tenants on the ground floor. So again, I'm asking, where are the tenants, visitors and employees and clients going to park?
Well, at this stage, the parking's been presented as an englobo pool of parking across the 3 levels, as you mentioned, and that's to be resolved depending on the needs of the respective tenants, those ground floor tenancies. And I think that the expectation, or certainly the desire, is that the majority of the trade is on foot, walking, where pedestrian densities and movement around this site and in this location don't see a use of cars to, it's the tenancies within. I don't see them as being a destination within where people drive from beyond, and greater distances beyond to park on site to come to them. It might happen rarely or occasionally, but this is about the location maturing as a genuine mixed use area where a lot of patronage to these ground floor tenancies is by foot, and from within the building itself, there'll be a substantial workforce there.
Yeah, thank you. With all due respect, we hear that a lot, but in Canning Bridge particularly, parking is an issue because it was always said that they'd catch public transport, but the reality is that people don't, and that's why a community benefit, especially for that particular area, would be an increase in parking. But thank you very much for your responses.
Thank you. Members in the room, do you have any questions? Yes, we go to member Karen Hyde, and then we are going to member John Syme.
Thank you for your presentation. A lot of the community benefit discussion comes out of element 22 and that associated with some bonus height. The RAR seems to recognise, and your report recognises, that out of the long list that's in element 22, that you've actually already provided at least 4, if not 5, of those aspects of element 22 without consideration of the public parking offering. So my question is, where did, in the first instance, the number 7 come from? Where was it? Was that just from the a calculation across the different developments, given that you'd already provided a fair amount of community benefit in terms of seeding of land for Canning Bridge, Canning Road, view corridors, improvement of pedestrian environment, landscape requirements, and those active frontages? Where did the conversation come from for additional community benefit in those 7 bays?
The 7 bays as a number came from the city's proposition or question of myself prior to Christmas, whether or not the notion of other parking on site would be entertained for public use, in response to which we said no. The question came back to us, would you entertain the parking at the ground floor level, being 7 bays, as being made available for public use? Our verbatim response was we were happy for that to be visitor space.
Okay.
Subsequent to that, it's come back. And
it's Understood. Okay, so it came from the city as an additional over and above all those other benefits, and you agreed to 7 basically, which is what you thought was in the original set of
Correct.
conditions. Okay.
So, sorry, just
yeah.
before you move from that, it's a direct question related to that. Could I get clarity from yourself, please, in relation to those bays? You referred to them just a few moments ago as visitor. The documentation refers to those as specified general public bays. Do you have any comment to make in the context of how the language in that condition is worded in the context of what you've just commented about visitor?
We went back to the city and indicated that we were happy to entertain those as being visitor bays. The city's position in condition 11 came back as or 7 publicly accessible bays, which we are supportive by way of that original condition 11.
Okay.
Continue.
Yes, thank you. There are various versions of conditions and explanations that we have received. But if we were to look at condition 11 as it is currently worded, Tony, is what you're seeking of us, because it's all very well talking about the original, but what we've got before us here is one set in the RAR. If we look at what we've got before us, are you looking ideal to have the number 7 introduced into 11A and also 11C, or how do you propose your request to be handled?
The 7.
The 7 is because
It's in condition 11 as we have it at the moment,
Yes.
of course, there's no number whatsoever.
is it
I think
only a reference to the ground floor.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's referred to in a footnote.
It's in an advice note.
In a advice note. So yes, it refers to 7 there.
Yes, it does.
And to that end, we were satisfied. Well, we thought that was fair and reasonable, and that the number was tied up via the footnote. Getting my specs on to address you, but it's not. No, it's not exclusively mentioned in that condition.
So that would be your proposal would be to mention 7 in that condition 11. Is that correct?
If it's
Are there
viewed
other
as-
aspects of that condition which are contrary to your earlier understanding?
No, we went through that last Wednesday and we were satisfied. Initially we weren't overly happy with it. We don't want contamination on site where the future tenant's concerned, and we want things to work appropriately, obviously across all fronts. But we did accept that condition as presented, and we thought the number 7 was adequately referenced in the advice note. But if there's a sense that it needs to be included in the condition, so it'd be.
So did you want to make a further comment?
Yeah, just wanted to make, so as to Tony's point, and the reason that we weren't challenging the wording of the condition 11 as it stood was.
As it stands now
as it
before
stands
us
in the RAR.
now,
in
right?
the RAR.
Yes.
And excuse, sorry, the reference to 7, that's an internal thing, but it is in the advice note. It's also on the plans that would also follow the approval, which would make it that the 7 bays are clearly, there's 7 of them, and there's only 7 on that level. So the plans in combination with the condition, in combination with the advice note would, as it stands, would make it 7, irrespective of what else we tried to do. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we felt that it was locked in as being 7.
Okay, so the issue has really occurred from the addendum that has come forward since that point.
Yes, correct.
All right, all right. My next question would be around public art. You referenced
Sorry,
public.
while we're on condition 11, can I just ask a follow-up question? Are you happy with condition 11C? And how do you see that working?
When we spoke last Wednesday, we thought that had the potential to manifest negatively in terms of how we'd like to keep the site under the control of one entity, being Carcione Group of companies, etc. In terms of how it works, we weren't enamored with that part to the condition. I'll be honest in that regard.
I I'm worried about the word control and manage.
I've got some technical.
Yes. No, go for it, Paul.
Yeah, so I feel like condition C11C can prejudice our parking management plan because it's really getting ahead of the overall planning for how parking will function on the site, and it's preempting how it can function. Just from a traffic engineering standpoint, when I saw those bays on the ground level originally, I envisaged that they would be really suitable for short-term parking. So we would ideally want, and it could be different restrictions on different bays, but we'd want some of the bays to be like literally 5 minutes, just 5 minutes parking, which would be for ride share, people getting picked up or dropped off by Uber, and it could be for just like deliveries in vans, just for office tenancies or to couriers. So we would want probably a mix of time control limits on those bays.
Paul, would you envisage that that would ordinarily come through from the development of the parking management plan and that collaboration process with the city to prepare that?
Correct, and that's what I would be doing as part of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Continue.
Yeah, thank you. Like that. Just on the public art, you raised an issue on the public art, and that would concern conditions 8 and 9 as we have them in RAR before us. What was your proposal for amendment of those? Are you suggesting that your contribution should be in total capped at $500,000?
I am suggesting that on the back of what and out of the 2017 agenda for Savannah and that project. And I did also look at it, noting that if that condition were to come out, there's a whole lot of renumbering and administration and the like required, but it's presented as I discussed it.
Right. Okay. I think those were my only, just any issue. I mean, they're titled main roads conditions, which is a little unusual in an RAR from the city, but do you have any issues with those aspects of the RAR?
No, look, we work closely with the city in that regard, and I think that the outcome there and what they represent is workable.
Okay, thank you.
John Syme.
Just a couple of questions. I did have a lot on condition 11, but I think they've been taken up. Without going into specifics, we're talking about extended work hours. Can you give us some idea of what the nature of the occupants might be without going into precisely who they might be? What sorts of companies are we talking about? What sort of operations do they do is the question.
I don't know enough, to be honest with you, and it's very much commercial competence that I don't know. Vince, if I can defer to Vince to assist in that regard.
So the two potential tenants that we're talking to now are in the mining services space. So they provide, obviously services to different.
Okay, good.
So
my question is getting to the 24/7
Yeah.
element of it.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, if it's an operations centre for a PHP, then it's 24 hours a day, but it's not that. It's
not that, but a lot of the mines that do work 24-hour shifts, night shifts and day shifts. A lot of these companies that provide services to those operations, assume they will have some back of house.
Okay.
any further questions?
Yes, just one. I noticed that you've got some access for the waste management vehicles, presumably the waste collection vehicles, on the adjacent site. How does that work from an access point of view?
To easement.
Paul can ask the technical side to it. Where access is catered to in a lawful sense, there is a reciprocal right of carriageway
Okay,
and an easement across that land.
that's the question. That's it.
Further questions? I've got a couple of questions. One of my questions relates to condition 20. I would like your comment about that particular which is notification on title. I note that this is typically related to sensitive land uses such as residential, for which the site is not proposing. Do you have any comments in relation to condition 24?
I think you're entirely correct, presiding member, that it is something that normally finds its way on.
Sorry, I missed what you said.
I think you're entirely correct with respect to that condition and where it normally finds itself by way of being on in a list of conditions. In working through the conditions and getting clarity from the City of Melville, it was confirmed that quite a number of these conditions, and I think including that one, is generic to the Canning Bridge Activity Centre location, and that's potentially why it's in there. Whether it's relevant to this project, being commercial in nature, I think you've questioned it. It's not an unfair question.
And my second one relates to advice note, essentially 7. Advice note 7, it ties back to public art. There is a provision in there that talks about additional calculation based on the estimated cost of 60 million, 500,000 contribution. Was spoken slightly earlier in relation to this matter, and there's another sentence that says, and an additional contribution of 0.5% for every construction dollar above 50 million required to be paid into the city's public art fund. Do you have any comments in particular in relation to that sentence?
I do. Where my concluding comment was around public art, it was in relation to, or picks up on what you've just identified, that we'd like it capped at 500,000, and it seems like that would be an apples for apples requirement vis-a-vis that for Sabina. So in fairness, I have asked that question of the panel, yes.
My final question relates to the overall building design. A lot of discussions already been had about the overall height of the stories of the development in the context of the discretion and the bonuses. Can you speak further about the design? And I note that there is a difference, and I'm specifically targeting the commentary around one story versus the design that incorporates higher floor to ceiling height. Can you speak to the design principle that is driving the overall height, but not the stories? Could you speak to that, please?
And Michael just respond to that. All yours, Michael.
Thanks, Dan. I will talk to that. Sorry. Thanks. So yeah, the 15-story requirement that is in the precinct plan clearly refers to residential construction, and we can determine that on the basis of the overall height of 48 metres that's prescribed, covers a 4.5 metre ground floor plane that would meet the requirements to meet all the mechanical for functioning, low level, F&B, etc. Roughly 4.2 to 4.5 would take that. You take that off the 48 and the remaining 14 floors would hit pretty much exactly 3.1 metres floor to floor. That is considered to be probably on the edge of a residential apartment building number. You can get it down slightly, but that is where that 48 metres, in my mind, without knowing the history of the plan and who developed it, sits. Commercially, on an office building, which the client has specifically targeting A-grade office, you're pushing at least an absolute minimum of 3,600 floor to floor, and that is tight, probably 38. So when you add all that together, it's straight away at 15 floors, assuming the ground floor is 44.5, is at least 9 metres in height, at least, and that's being super conservative. So I have to add 9 metres even to get 15 floors. If you add an extra floor at the 36, that's 13 to 14 metres. And the other thing that's probably a little unclear here in the way we've designed it, so that's the technical. The other thing behind what we've done here is we made it clear in the DRP that we consider this building particularly relevant to the building that is opposite, that is a residential building, and the people in that building look down on the building and they will see the roof. And it's going to sound a little bit like architecty, but we always talk about it as the 5th elevation, which is the flat elevation that you see. And so we've been quite careful here, and we sold this to the DRP as a real issue, that we're trying to make the top of the building also look good. right? Not that they look down and they see all the rubbish that is usually on the roof, i.e. the mech plant, etc. So we have actually extended the walls on this building to hide that underneath at cost to the client, mind you. So he's going to kick me later. And then put solar panels on top of that to basically create a fifth elevation. So the height on this building is not necessarily to the benefit of the client as it is to the benefit of the project. So I heard the discussion about community benefit. I would argue that community benefit too, in my personal mind, but I'm an architect, so I argue all those things. But does that kind of explain it? So there's all those layers that go together to making this, in my mind, not unreasonable in its height, even though it is, we acknowledge, over the height.
And my final question now, you've spoken about overall height. That was my first question. My second question, specifically with the design, so again, back to yourself, is I'd like for you to speak further. We have all the documentation, have read all your documentation provided. I'd like to speak further about the elements that contribute, in your perspective and your client's perspective, to creating a landmark building, and that is a cornerstone principle for this particular site. I'd like you to speak about the elements that you've included and how they operate in order to achieve that landmark status, both in terms of functionality, location, and or design of materials. Any of those elements, I'll be interested in your commentary on that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I'm going to try and remember back to all of our DRP in our building, but I should be able to do it. So one of the key elements here, again, which contributed to height, is an expression on the building of the corner, in this case, all the corners, so that we're not just creating a flat top roof construction, office building that peaks out and achieves the levels that we want to tick. So you've got some featured elements in terms of the exaggeration of the corner. And the idea of that is that the building itself has long range vista, how do we call it? You talk to it as landmark, but we talk to it as an element that is identifiable, i.e. it becomes a building that someone can say, well, that's the building on the entry to the Canning Bridge Centre from a distance. Similarly, I'll use an example like the original tower here, which was the Raffles Hotel. It became a landmark identifiable building in the round before all the other buildings grew up. So we're saying this building at the carriageway to the Canning Highway entry as you come in has an expressed corner which exaggerates the height too. It has signage opportunities on those corners to landmark and direct it. The materials and consistency of the building was also one of the key elements, i.e. that we didn't just create a building that was viewed from one side, it was viewed from all four. There's consistency in the full perimeter of the building in terms of materials, simple materials. We're looking at a cladding material that breaks the negative and the positive. The glazing becomes in this case, the negative, and the positive becomes the solid elements. And we stratified that over the building, and it was related. I'm not sure if you referenced the DRP here, but we referenced the DRP commentary over the signatures of stratification in the surrounding river precinct in terms of landmark stratification of rock faces, etc., that we then brought into the site. We created a crevice component within the building that was met on both sides, the Canning Highway Bridge side and the Canning Highway side. So you've got this slot that runs up the entire building. I should have the building up on the screen to talk about it, but and that negative was a crevice that was a crack in the facade that was trying to bring people from the ground floor playing their eye up through the building. I can go on about this building forever, but so there's all sorts of elements like that we believe create an architectural statement that says this is the element that's the corner of the Canning Bridge precinct. I can keep going on probably for hours on it. I'm just trying to remember all of the different things because I wasn't expecting that question today, sorry. But yeah, those are the sorts of things that we've tried to break into it. At the ground plane, there was a lot of chat about how that personal interface is because you can view the building from a long way away. But on the ground plane, you need to have that real sort of I suppose we call it fine-grained detail that happens in, say, the car parking levels. And again, that textural breakup of the screening around the car parking is quite detailed in the way that the metal panels are moved. They run in different directions and they're perforated in different ways so that when you look at it, it's got this breakup of like they're the layers of the stratification of limestone cliffs. And the idea being that then we're going to grow plants through it so it looks like a natural rock face. So these are all these sorts of architectural ideas that we've brought in to try and create an experience around the building that is not just turn up, go in, leave. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. That is my final question. We will now move to city officers. If there's no further questions at this juncture, panel members, you can come back to earlier presenters. We are now moving to city officers. We have a presentation from Peter Varelis from the City of Melville. We have your documentation. Hand over to yourself, and then we will continue from that point to questions to yourself and other officers in relation to the proposal.
Thank you, presiding member and all in attendance. I appreciate approving the city's deputation. We just would like to start off to say the city is generally supportive of this development, and it is designed to a high quality, and that's reflected by our design review panel's comments on this proposal. I'll take the information that's been submitted as read, and I will go to some salient points in the interest of time. The Canning Bridge Activity Centre plan has a community benefits framework. Element 22 speaks to proportionality. There is an existing established precedent on community benefits, and it's important that the integrity of those community benefits that have been approved historically throughout the CBACP's life is maintained. Community benefits have been established in harder economic times than present, and those community benefits have been significant. They're listed in the Responsible Authority report. Some of those are car parking spaces, as has been mentioned today, but we have also received titled community space within these developments in response to bonus heights that have been given, and that goes to the proportionality. This development is 36 metres above the sets standards that are within the CBACP. The requests of the city, we don't feel are unreasonable. We're not asking for titled space, and we're not asking for additional built form. It's built form that's existing within the space, and we're asking for access of that outside of standard office hours. The city's open to commensurate alternatives that the applicant may put forward, and we're happy to have ongoing discussions with them on the management measures that could be put in place to make this practical for both the broader community, the city and the applicant. A short deferral may be permitted or may be considered by the panel to enable those discussions to occur, to ensure that we get a practical outcome that benefits all parties and the community at large. For the discretion that's being sought, which I stress is 36 metres above that's permitted under the base standards of the CBACP. All three of us are here for any questions from the panel.
Thank you for your presentation. Panel members, are there any questions to city officers? I'll first go online. Matthew, would you have any questions to city officers?
Yes, thank you. Just around the community benefits that are being provided, there was, I think, reference made to some other community benefits under element 22 that are being provided. Could you just could you just perhaps talk to those and I guess whether they're common amongst the other major developments that have been approved in the CBACP? That is, you know, other titled community spaces and meeting rooms above and beyond those sort of, I guess, basic or, you know, general community benefits that developments have provided, or are they alternative?
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Deputy Mayor Woodall. The types of spaces that have been provided, as I mentioned through the start of my deputation, they are titled spaces that have been ceded to the city in freehold. These spaces include a library, makers centre, others include community spaces that are used for art galleries and the like, meeting spaces at the precinct included, public parking, and there are other benefits I don't have at hand, but in terms of substantial benefits, they're those that I've mentioned. And of most note is the fact that some of these spaces are titled spaces that have been provided in freehold to the city in exchange for bonuses proportional to what's been proposed today.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, I'll go to, excuse me. We'll go to member Glynis Barber. Do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, presiding member. Thank you, Mr. Varellas, for your presentation. The proponent has said that they were sort of blindsided by the clarification of condition 11. And I'm just questioning what was the precursor to well, how did negotiations go? Why were they so blindsided? Was it not discussed that there was going to be public parking as a potential community benefit? Can you just give some clarity on the negotiations leading up to what occurred on, I think it was the 7th of January, a meeting then? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Barber. It is worth noting that applications are under assessment until the report's been published. We note that there were some changes post-publishing of the initial RAR. Notwithstanding that, the commentary within the report is quite clear that it speaks to proportionality. It also speaks to the types of benefits and scale of benefits that were proposed at other developments. There was a follow-up with regards to the condition. There were communications between the city's officers and the applicant. I understand there were communications around the proportionality of public parking towards the end of December, and the applicant's position was very clear that they weren't willing to provide further public access to public car parking spaces. I will hand over to Manager Development Approvals, Ms. Kate Bainbridge, to elaborate further on that change.
Thank you. So through the chair, in relation to the 7 car parking spaces that are the ground floor, that was always a discussion in relation to always being available for public use. The clear distinction was the matter of ability to and inclusion of the car parking spaces that are, you know, in the basement and in podium levels being made available outside of the office hours, and that's what's led to the requirement for the addendum to clarify the wording on the conditions of the development approval. So the city's position in the report, and hence clarifications in the condition wording, was to clarify our position.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just, you also, in the most recent paperwork to the panel, have mentioned a brief deferral. What do you mean by a brief deferral?
Through the chair, thank you for your follow-up, Councillor Barber. The majority of issues and matters related to this development, we feel have been dealt with through the assessment process and through collaboration with the applicant. We are now in conjecture around public access to parking. We feel that there is middle ground that can be struck between the city's requests and the applicant's prospective tenants' requirements. We don't feel that it would take long for that to be discussed and a possible management measure arrived at. So a short deferral would allow us to have those discussions and arrive at something that all parties could be agreeable to, would hope.
Thank you. Any further questions? Members in the room. Yes, moving to Member Karen Hyde.
Thank you. If I could just ask again, going back to element 22, and certainly your responsible authority report does highlight those aspects of community benefit from page 30 onwards, which in your view and your assessment, the applicant has made an adequate or sufficient contribution towards. I think under element 22 1.1, you've actually included matters of street frontages as well as landscape, as well as I think pedestrian footpath, which I think are separate elements within element 22. But you yourselves have identified that together with the pedestrian network, together with the seeding of land for planning highway, together with the provision for view corridors, has all met those requirements as community benefits under element 22. So, and your report does actually say there's an additional opportunity for public car parking over and above those 4 elements which meet the requirements of element 22. So just wanting to be clear, when you talk about proportionality and we talk about element 22, when is enough enough? When is an applicant actually meeting the requirements of element 22, and how much more is reasonable to load on top of that?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Member Hyde. As you mentioned, proportionality is an important consideration. The development has met a number of the requirements under element 22. However, we acknowledge that in community benefits framework that's been established through previous developments, and having regard for the additional height that's being sought and proportionality and the existing developments that have been approved and the community benefits that have been proposed, while there are a number of features within the elements that have been met through other means, in the context of an additional 36 metres, we feel that it should be going over and above, and that's reflected in the additional information that's been provided.
All right. Some of the conditions from main roads would normally really be advice notes. Did you have a particular need to add them as conditions? What role will the city play in all of those?
Through the chair, thank you for the follow-up. I will defer to our Manager of Development Approvals, Ms. Kate Bainbridge.
Thank you, through the chair. In relation to the advice notes which contain the specifics of the community benefits, it's following previous condition wording that we've used for other developments. We're currently in the process of filling those requirements accordingly through deeds with working with applicants on other projects. It's neither here nor there. I do see the benefit of them being contained within conditions in lieu of advice notes, but we've just followed previous condition wording, which we found to be effective in clearance for other developments.
Okay, so thank you for that. I was asking really about the main roads conditions, though. I appreciate that your follow-up was pertinent to my earlier question. But those main roads conditions, 39, for instance, a working on roads permit obtained from main roads. Ordinarily, things like that would be an advice note. So the city doesn't fundamentally have a role in that. So I'm just wondering how you clear those conditions.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Through the chair, just in relation to the main roads conditions, the way that our delegation works is that we have to place them verbatim from main roads. So we don't have the ability to augment those conditions unless we get permission from main roads. So if we, for example, disagreed with the conditions from main roads and wanted to augment them without permission of them, then they would need to be dual reporting through DPLH. So we have just contained them with as verbatim from main roads, but I do agree that it would be better placed as an advice note.
Okay, and obviously the DAP is not held to that matter of delegation, so for us to determine. All right, thank you for that. No further questions from me.
Any further questions from panel members?
Could I ask a question, presiding member?
Yes, sorry, let me put my glasses on, I can't see it from there. Yes, would you like to ask the question?
Yes, thank you. It was just around the city officer's comments previously about other developments that had been approved that had provided community meeting space and title to community areas. I just wonder, given this development has proposed some community benefits, which I think have been noted, such as street frontages and some street furniture and landscaping and whatnot. Are those community benefits were they also a feature of those other developments where they provided those community spaces? Like, what I'm asking is, are they common community benefits that effectively all major developments in the CBACP provide, or are they unique to this one?
Through the chair, thank you for your follow-up, Deputy Mayor Woodall. That's correct. Many of those developments that I referenced earlier with title community benefits certainly do have significant landscaping, activated frontages and the like, in addition to providing title spaces, in addition to providing public car parking, some of which is the exclusive use of the city.
Thank you. And just one further follow-up, if I may, just around the discussion and sort of commentary around the ground floor tenancies and the I guess concerns that I think Councillor Barber correctly raised around patrons and driving there and needing somewhere to park. Is that something that the city will work through with the applicant as part of the parking management plan? And also from the city's experience with other developments which have, I guess, either retail or, food and beverage type outlets, is it the reality that people in the CBACP are mainly, walking to these destinations, or is the city's experience that there are still, a significant proportion of people who drive and look for somewhere to park?
Through the chair, thank you for your follow-up question, Councillor Deputy Mayor Woodall. The intention was to work through the parking management plan for the allocation of bays to the different commercial tenancies, which does take me also to the point made by the traffic engineer around the tenants and the occupants frequenting the various car parking spaces. Given the land area of the commercial floor spaces on the ground floor, it was always intended that there would be public parking in some of those level bases, some of those level car parking spaces. So that's just also making that point. And in answer to your second part of the question, it is our experience that the people that are living in the area above and in these apartments generally are walking to these facilities, but there are many members of our locality, within our locality, that are driving to these destinations as well. And these members are using the community benefit spaces in the precinct and the like that have been provided.
Thank you. That was all my questions.
Thank you. Members, if there are no further questions, we will now move back to the agenda. And I'd like to thank city officers and applicants for responding to those questions. As per the DAP provisions, there is a recommendation at the beginning of the RA. There are some alternate pieces of information, but as per those provisions, I will first call for a mover of the recommendation as written in the right at the beginning of the RA. Is there a mover of the recommendation as written?
Madam Presiding Member, is it the appropriate time for me to move a potential deferral?
We need to first deal with the motion.
I'll put it on the table.
So the way the standing orders are written, we need to deal with the motion at the beginning of the RA before going to any alternate motions. So that's why I'm dealing with that one at this point in time.
Thank you.
I move the RAR.
Second.
Okay. So Member Karen Hyde and Member John Hyde are moving the recommendation as written at the beginning of the RA, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, member, we will, as part of normal procedures, we will deal with the normal order of discussion and debate, which case procedural motions can also be considered as well. Over to yourself, Member Karen Hyde.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'm very comfortable in supporting this application for office and commercial tenancies, finding that it meets the requirements of LPS 6, SPP 4.2, and also the Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan. The DRP's response was very positive in that it meets design excellence, which is one of those aspects to achieve additional height, and assessment against SPP 7 was also very positive, meeting, I think, practically all of the principles there. None of that design review panel assessment, including that associated with the community principle, actually mentioned the public parking. I think it's somewhat slightly above height in one respect, according to the structure plan, being technically 1 floor above 15. But the structure plan doesn't necessarily mention height other than a maximum of 48 metres with a bonus of up to 62 metres, and then the podium of between 7 and 13.5 metres. And this development of 16 stories hits 58.2, so it's within the maximum height. To my mind, it's in keeping with the scale emerging for the precinct and the prominence of the corner location. And I do think we need to be quite aware in making comparisons between residential and commercial buildings of those essentials in floor-to-floor dimensions, and they are quite different. And I do accept the applicant's architect's argument in that respect. And I feel that the contention of a 3.7 metre floor to floor, or perhaps even a little more, is quite appropriate in this respect, and hence over 16 floors, that adds to the additional height without necessarily guaranteeing any additional bonus floor space per se. The technical parking shortfall I find acceptable. This is a Todd precinct, and I think an oversupply of parking or an over encouragement of people coming to the area to park should be discouraged, and certainly encouragement for other modes of transport is what we are hoping for here, including active as well as public. So the shortfall to me is acceptable. I find it meets the requirements under element 21 with just a minor variation to the lot size of about 3%, I think, which is, I think, quite acceptable. It's quite a difficult corner site, and it's having to cede land as well. I won't go into any more in terms of the community benefit, but I do believe that under element 22, the application has met their obligations and exceeded them without providing public car parking. But I do accept that through discussions, there has been some identified need for public bays, but that the dialogue has generally worked around the number of 7 as a negotiable outcome of that. So before going further, presiding member, I would like to propose an amending motion.
And your amending motion is?
To condition 11 to add the number 7, the 7 car parking bays that be provided for public parking under A, and also to delete C.
So for just to get clarity, in part 11A,
Yes.
the car parking bays, are you saying that the detail should be that 7?
Yes.
So at the beginning, for the minute taker, just to get clarity, A starts with that 7.
Yes.
Then continues on with the remainder as
Yes.
written, car parking bays.
Yes.
B retained and C is deleted
Yes.
as part of 11. Is there a seconder for amendment 1? It is seconded, John Sy. Would you like to speak to amendment 1?
Thank you. I think there are a number of issues associated with applying public parking within a private commercial office development, which includes basement parking and above ground parking from a safety, security, accessibility, legibility, potentially Australian standard point of view without going back through significant redesign. I think it also questions the viability of the development from the point of view of handing on this responsibility through strata management. That is outside of the planning framework, but I think that's something to be aware of. I'm particularly concerned about C at this point in the condition, because I think it overrides then the ability to prepare a parking management plan, because it's basically saying the City of Melville are managing the parking. So I think that the parking management plan is the right place for that discussion and negotiation around the public bays, whether they're paid bays, the time frame associated with them, the location of them. And I think also it is recognising already in this condition that there needs to be parking available for the tenancies on the ground floor. And again, the parking management plan is the right place to do that in a collaborative way.
Would the seconder like to speak to amendment 1?
Yes, look, I agree with those points. I think a parking management plan is the appropriate place for this. The 7 is there for clarity. That's the first part of it. The second, removing C, I think is important in this case. I think the actual logistics of this in a commercial office space is something which is a bit tricky, and I think, and I'll speak about this a bit more later. I think we need to not not compare apples with oranges. I think that there is a fundamental difference between a commercial building and a residential building. And we're into a commercial building with its own life form and its own sets of procedures and so on, including how the parking is managed. I think any of the issues that might be brought up by the city can be managed within the context of the parking management plan. I think that with regard to whether this offends element 22, I don't think it does. I think there are enough elements of at least 4 of the other elements of element 22 have been satisfied without having generated in this. So for those reasons, I think it is much cleaner for all if we run this through the parking management plan.
Thank you. Members, are there any other speakers on Amendment 1? We're going to Deputy Mayor Matthew Woodall.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Look, I oppose this amendment. I think that the city's position of requiring publicly accessible bays outside of standard office hours is reasonable. The other community benefits provided under element 22 are common to effectively all developments major developments within the CBACP, and those other developments have provided additional community benefits far exceeding publicly accessible parking, such as title to floor space, community libraries, meeting rooms, and so on. This development is not providing any of those things. The only community benefit substantial is the public parking, in my mind. And perhaps it's a feature of the CBACP now being a number of years old, noting that there is a revised CBACP currently under consideration, but the existing one, I would suggest that the community benefits in element 22, such as the street frontages, furniture, landscaping, and so on, are effectively common features of high quality development in 2026. So I don't think that they're particularly unique to this development. And I think certainly to justify 36 metre increase in height beyond the as of right requirement or threshold, I think does justify public parking. In terms of the specific amendment changes, I understand where the 7 reference is coming from, but as I sort of outlined, I don't agree with that. I think there is potentially a compromise that could be worked through between the city and the applicant, and I think in respect of the ground floor tenancies, which are not office space, they're food and beverage type outlets and whatnot. There will effectively need to be public parking for those, and 7 bays is going to be wholly inadequate for that. So I would suggest that that at the very least will need to be dealt with as part of the parking management plan. In terms of item C, I think there's a real concern around having public parking that is not controlled by the city. I understand that it may be addressed in the parking management plan, but ultimately we've found that the city having control of the public parking gives the community more confidence in it being provided, allows the city to control any charges that might be applicable and ensure consistency across car parks in the Canning Bridge area. Currently, the city has a general policy of first hour free parking, and so we wouldn't want to end up in a situation where one car park provides first hour free and another provides 2 hours free or doesn't provide any, because that often leads to concerns from the community. So I think that condition C should remain, and if it is deleted, I think there will be concerns and it will set a precedent for future developments that I think would be unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on Amendment 1?
Well, yes, can I speak against the amendment? Thank you. I concur with the previous speaker. I believe that not many community benefits have been given that are for the community's benefit. I think the community benefits listed largely in element 22 are for the benefit of the building, which is fantastic. However, one of the key benefits was some public parking for the Canning Bridge area, and taking that away, I think, is very disappointing. And I agree with the city having control. Element C should stay in for consistency of the area and for better management. Thank you.
Thank you. I will speak to the motion on the table. I am supportive of this amendment. This site is within a precinct area, Todd development. The intention and the objectives of the precinct plan is to encourage intensification of development and a variety of land uses. From my perspective, this definitely introduces a much needed mix of land uses by the introduction of significant commercial. In terms of the parking, the changes to the parking I think are appropriate and relative to the nature of the commercial development. The need to create a mix within that area is critical, as well as the facilitation of intensification of the area and the ability for walkability. I don't see any negatives in relation to this, and the area, like many other areas that are continuing to intensify, the intention is to encourage and support ground level activation and pedestrian movement. From my perspective, I am supportive of this change, and that the obligations and controls are managed by the owner of that site and the tenants of that site, to ensure that it does function appropriately. I don't have any problems with this modification and or the introduction of the 7 bays. Those are my comments. Would the mover like a right of reply?
Thank you. I do note that yes, as the Deputy Mayor is outlining, that the precinct plan is under review. However, we have before us, and as per the RAR, have been instructed to consider this development in the context of the one that is current at the moment. And in that respect, there is a choice. Under element 22, public car parking is not mandated. Perhaps that is something for future review, but at this point, it is one of those elective elements, and therefore I'm quite comfortable with having some level of discretion over how that particular part of element 22 is applied, and certainly find that to be over and above those other aspects which have been offered through this development. And yes, they're not necessarily unique, but again, the plan that we have that guides our decision does not suggest that these need to be necessarily unique to each development, and it I find meets the requirements of element 22 adequately with this amendment in place.
That is the close of debate on amendment 1. We are going to the vote. All those in favour? Against? It's carried 3-2. Back to yourself, Member Hyde.
Thank you. My second amendment is to certainly advice note 2, advice note 7. And I think the condition 9 associated with that amendment would be to delete the second sentence of advice note 7.
So advice note 7, when you say second sentence.
Sorry, the sentence that begins an additional contribution of 0.5%. Is that the third sentence? It is the third sentence.
So amendment 2 is to delete condition 9 and to modify advice note 7, removing the words, which is the third sentence down, an additional contribution of 0.5% for every construction dollar over 50 million is required to be paid into the city's public art fund for the minute taker.
That's right, and it's deletion of 9, isn't it?
Yes, deletion of 9, condition 9, and the modification that I read out of 7, as I understand that you just moved. Is there a seconder for amendment 2? It is seconded. Member John Syme. Would the mover like to speak to this?
There is a calculation, obviously, for public art. The calculation as per the advice note and the first couple of sentences of the advice note clearly identify that that's for $500,000, which is not an insignificant sum. That can purchase a great deal of public art, as well as installation and ongoing maintenance, etc. So I feel that that is adequate. When we talk about proportionality, the applicant has identified other comparisons where the amount has been capped at that rate. And therefore, I think that this is an appropriate development to make sure that that's similar, rather than to keep applying a contribution over and above $60 million, which is the target expenditure for this project.
Would the seconder like to speak to Amendment 2?
Look, I've got no fresh points to make on that. I think be careful that public art is sufficient, but not becoming a tax on development. And I think in some instances that's becoming that way. I think that we noted as a 500,000 contribution is appropriate in this case. It's a big sum for any amount of public art, as befits a substantial development. But I don't think we need more.
Any other speakers on Amendment 2?
Madam Presiding Member, I do notice the Director of Planning has his hand up. I don't know, did you want to speak, Mr. Borellis?
We're not at a question time at this point. Is there a specific matter that we are being informed of, or is it a general comment from officers that you're wanting to tell us about?
Oh, sorry, through the chair.
I wondered what...
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
City
so
office.
Just wish to make a clarification point on if the intention is to cap the public art contribution, it is more appropriate to alter condition number 8. Because it makes reference to local planning policy 1.4.
Okay.
And local planning policy 1.4 is where it specifies the additional contribution amount is required up and above 50 million, but where the cost of development exceeds 50 million. So the advice note just seeks to clarify and articulate what's already contained within local planning policy 1.4. So I highly recommend that if the panel's intention is to public art contribution, that you alter condition number 8. Thank you.
Yes, I did wonder about that. Thank you very much for that. Where would you suggest that that should take place in condition 8? Should it be the first sentence?
In any event, public art contribution.
I can add that to the end then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair, I believe that at the end would be a more appropriate location.
Okay.
Something like, in any event, the public art contribution will not exceed $500,000. That would do the job, wouldn't it?
I believe so, yes.
I'm happy to include that wording in my amendment, presiding member.
So we've had, just for the minute taker and for members, so we are obviously now back online for everybody that's we've been online for a little while now, that in order for completeness of the records, the clarification from officers have reflected the condition, a modification to condition 8, which includes some additional words at the end of it, and words at the end of it that
In any event.
that will state in any event
Public art contribution will not exceed 500,000.
the public art contribution will not exceed
500,000.
sorry, can't type fast enough. Exceed 500,000. So from just before we move on and confirm with the mover and the seconder, from the officers, could you please just in reference to the language we are using, I'm not asking you to form a view on our decision making, is that the reference that you were referring to in condition 8?
Sorry, the clarification at the end of the wording at the end of the conditions. Yes, we can't see it on the screen, but as was discussed at the end, we believe it to be the most appropriate location, and being specific to cap the amount to $500,000 as was discussed by the panel.
That is the intention of this amendment. Thank you for that. So for mover and seconder, are you comfortable with the inclusion? There is no further discussion at this juncture from either of you. We are now going to other members' conversation and discussion on Amendment 2. Is there any further discussion on Amendment 2? We are going to Deputy Mayor Matthew Woodall.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Look, I wish to oppose this amendment. In my view, Planning Policy 1.4 should apply. It quite clearly sets out the requirements for public art for major developments, and that is for a percentage of the total build cost. I think the Sabina approval, which capped it, was a decision of the DAP, and I don't think it should set a precedent, which is what we appear to now be trying to do. There is a local planning policy which applies, and I think if continual deviations from that policy are made, it will bring into question why we have a policy to begin with. Just in terms of the development itself, I think given the significance of the development and the fact that it's a landmark location on a corner, it is reasonable for it to provide additional public art. Effectively, we're not, in the scheme of the development, we're not talking about a massive sum of money that will somehow make the development unviable to proceed. Effectively, what we're just talking about is an amount which, if anything, will just limit the return on the investment from the development going ahead. I don't think it's an excessive request. I'm fully confident that the development will proceed regardless of whether we make this amendment or not, and I think it would be preferable, given the scale of the development and the importance of the location, that additional funding is provided in accordance with the city's policy, and that's used to provide public art, which will further benefit the community and the outlook. I think that's particularly the case if it's not going to have more than 7 public parking bays. Then the additional public art could be seen as a community benefit, which otherwise is not being provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this amendment? If there are no other. Sorry, did you wish to say?
No, I don't. I concur with the previous speaker, Councillor Woodall.
I will speak to this item, and I do understand the comments and the concerns been raised in relation to the way public art funds are managed through the policy. From my perspective, I'm supportive of this change, and my rationale for that supporting of change is that, like all policy positions, they are due regard, and that consideration does need to be given, from my perspective, in relation to the elements that relate specifically to this proposal. It's on a very prominent corner. It is a landmark site. We have material included in here, as well as conversation during today's meeting being provided at a reasonable amount of detail from the project architect about the design elements that have been incorporated in to create a statement piece, which is a contribution to the aesthetics and the character of the area, in the same manner that the expectation around public art is in terms of improvements and visuals within the local precincts and creating identity within the precinct. From my perspective, my consideration on additional funding for public art sits directly in relation to how this proposal fits within its locational setting. It is a removal of what are currently very low-rise developments, car-orientated activities with a substantial ground floor interaction, including awnings over it, which creates a residential environment. From my perspective, the elements of this design go towards the improvement and visuals that public funds would typically also seek to enhance in a local community area, a local precinct area. So I am supportive of this change. Would the mover like a right of reply?
Thank you. I concur. As a policy does many things other than just calculate. It informs the way in which the public art might be considered and provided, and the process, the calculation is but one element of it. And I think that the public art that will be provided is over and above everything else that's being provided. It's not saying, this amendment is not saying no public art. It is simply saying to a financial level. So, and I think that's a significant level. I'm quite comfortable with giving some level of certainty in this time when we do have extraordinary escalation of costs and so forth. Thank you.
We've had right of reply for amendment 2. We are going to the vote. All those in favour? Against? It is carried 3-2. I'm moving back to the member. Hyde, do you have any further matters you wish to raise?
My last amendment, presiding member, is condition 24, which I wish to delete.
Condition 24 to be deleted. Is there a seconder of condition 24 for deletion? It is seconded. John Syme, would you like to speak to?
Just very briefly, presiding member, these matters are usually associated with residential, schools, childcare, those sorts of sensitive uses, particularly where people are sleeping overnight or residing overnight. Quite often they're not even applied to hotels because hotels are of a transitory nature, and most of this activity will be during the daytime period and into the evening. It's not a sensitive use in that respect, and therefore I find that it's not relevant. And I think even by the officers' responses, it's tended to be carried forward as one of those generic standard conditions, and therefore I think it's perfectly okay to delete it.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to this amendment 3?
Yes, look, I agree with that. There's no point in having burdens placed on procedure, particularly registering titles and registering things on title if they're really are not appropriate to this use, and this is not appropriate to this land use, I don't think.
Are there any other speakers in relation to amendment 3?
Just a question, if I may.
Yes.
Presumably, if the land use were to change significantly, then there would have to be a new development application. So I assume that it could be then added later if required. Would that be correct?
The proposal we have, yes, in many instances, yes, it depends on the nature of that. The proposal we have before us is commercial, and I suspect you are referring to some, for example, some change to residential, which would be a reasonable amount of variation from what we have in front of us.
Or accommodation.
Yes. Any other comments? I will speak to Amendment 3. I'm supportive of this amendment. I won't repeat the comments that have already been said, but I will note that the proposal does include acoustic treatments that protect that protect residential or sensitive developments that don't form part of this proposal but are in the surrounding area, which is typically what the concerns would be from the neighbouring sites. That's all my comments. I move back to the mover for right of reply.
To vote.
We are going to the vote on amendment 3, deletion of condition 24. All those in favour? All those against? It's carried 4-1. I am back to yourself.
Nothing more to say, I think, really. I would ordinarily perhaps fix up some of those main roads aspects, but I don't think they're very important for us to deal with today. We've dealt with the main issues, and so I'm happy to leave it there. Thank you.
Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
We're on the substantive motion.
It's included in the amendments.
Yes. Look, I would just very briefly, I think the applicant has actually undersold himself a fair bit. The land use on this, I think we need to recognise in this location is actually quite unusual. We are providing 750 or 800 jobs in a location which has one of its objectives, for example, section 3.2 of the Canning British Plan, Canning Canning Bridge Plan, item 4, seeks to, as an objective, increase the range of employment within the area and contribute to the achievement of sub-regional employment self-sufficiency targets. Now, communities around the place are always looking for employment. They're always looking for jobs. They're always looking for an economic development plan that says we'll have jobs. And it's very difficult to provide outside of the Perth CBD or outside of an industrial area. This is unusual, and I think we should recognise that. It is an unusual element, particularly within this location, and I think we can't undersell the amount of economic benefit and community benefit that we're doing locally. For example, just off the top of the head, if you've got 750 or 800 employees there in there, that will drive at least 2, 3, maybe 4 coffee shops. That alone. You've got substantial. You've got an element in there which starts to make Canning Bridge station, railway station, a destination station. It is currently an origin station. That is, people leave in the morning and come back in the afternoon. This will actually start to reverse those trends. This is consistent with the whole range of not only local but also state government planning policy. And I think we really should recognise that importance, because this is a very substantial amount of commercial floor space with very large employment impacts, and it's unusual. I think apart from that, every other element in the planning framework has been satisfactorily addressed. We've met all the conditions, all the elements to get any discretion. And discretion in this case is height, however it's measured in metres or in floors. It is 1 floor more than the as right. So from that regard, the change is small. It is a much higher amount of metres, but that is actually a slightly different matter. We're meeting all of the elements of all of the provisions of element 21. We're also meeting all of the elements of element 22. Once we've got into that, we are into the business of saying, well, we are in a business where we can start to think about additional height because we've met elements 21 and 22. The question is how high should that be? And I can't see anything rational in trying to do some proportionality if it can't be measured, and we really can't be measured. We're looking at what the physical nature of this, how it fits within the physical framework of this particular site. And I think it's been made very, very clear that from an urban design point of view, that height is entirely appropriate. It matches the building across the road. It is a very prominent location. It will be a very prominent building. I think if you're heading east down Canning Highway, it will be the first building you see. It will be a very important building, and I think I appreciate the explanation that we've been given from the architect as to what elements there are and how important, how much that has been prominent in the design. And I think from a design point of view, from a streetscape point of view, from a landmark building point of view, this has been extremely well done. So for all of those reasons, I think that we can fairly enthusiastically approve this as it is. I think that it's met all of the requirements that fit within the planning framework. I frankly think that anything beyond that, looking for additional public parking and so on in this context, is frankly overreach. I wouldn't be party to anything which would support that. I think there are sufficient positive aspects to this proposal that we can approve it as written in the RIR and as
Are there any other speakers on the substantive motion?
Yes, I'll speak. unless Councillor Barber wishes to.
No, you go first, that's fine.
If you would like to speak, yes.
Thank you. Look, I will speak against the substantive motion with the amendments. I think the amendments are very unfortunate. I think overall it's a good development that has merit in terms of, I agree with the comments around the commercial aspect not being in the CBACP, and as you know, most major developments have all been residential with only small amounts of retail and food and beverage on ground floors. So I think it is a positive change in that regard. However, I think the 7 public car bays and the lack of, or apparent lack of, parking for the ground floor tenancies is wholly inadequate. The other community benefits that have been provided are community benefits that have been provided by every major development in Canning Bridge. The difference is those other developments also provided things like the community spaces, libraries and whatnot. So I think when it comes to the question of proportionality, what's being provided here with the 7 bays is not proportionate to what is being sought for additional height. It would be reasonable if there was some sort of compromise, I think, in terms of additional public parking bays. I'm not necessarily agreeing that all the private bays should be open to the public, but I think there was an opportunity for additional public parking above the 7 that would have potentially satisfied both parties and could have been incorporated into the design. In terms of the other aspects of the development, I think, as we've discussed, the main one is the parking, but I think the public art as well for a landmark site. I think to cap the public art is unfortunate. The previous decision to cap the public art was a variation made by DAP. It was not something that I believe came from the city or was in the city's public art policy, yet it now seems to have been accepted that it's a new benchmark. And I'm not sure on what basis that figure has been arrived at or agreed, other than it's been applied once, therefore we've decided it's a benchmark. I think it sets a very troubling precedent. There's no reason why a future development application could not attempt to, say, cap the public art spend at 400,000, and then that would provide a benchmark for future decisions. I'm just not sure how that has been arrived at as a figure. I think it's wholly without any basis other than a previous DAP decision. And so overall, I think that with the amendments, the development shouldn't be supported. I think the original RAR, I think, had merit and there was a sensible compromise, and I would have supported a deferral to the item, but as it is, I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on the substantive motion?
Yes, I'd like to just quickly speak, if I may, Madam Presiding
Ms.
Member.
Barber, if you would like to speak to it.
Thank you. I did mention earlier that I would have preferred a deferral to this substantive motion. I believe there was room for negotiation and compromise between both parties, particularly in terms of condition 11 and the parking management plan. I'm disappointed that an amendment has been provided which has eroded the community benefit of public parking, and I think that is very unfortunate. Using the table that the proponent provided, comparing the other high-rise buildings, he mentioned Sabina on a number of occasions, but Riviere was 17 stories. Yes, it's residential, 2 over the 15-story limit, but even that provided 20 public car parking bays. And for this development to provide 0, I find very, very difficult to understand. Look, the City of Melville are very excited about having a commercial property in the Canning Bridge region, and that's terrific. And I think you're very excited, from what I'm gathering from the architects, builders, about their particular building. However, I am concerned about the people in the adjoining or adjacent apartment blocks looking down onto walls and solar panels. I didn't quite get how that was going to be a nice thing to look at. However, we are excited. I am disappointed though, because I would have liked a deferral to enable the city and the proponents to come to some sort of agreement as to a proper community benefit. And I'm disappointed that those community benefits haven't been realised. So I can't at this point in time support this motion.
Thank you for your comments.
Presiding member, am I able to move a deferral as a procedural motion?
Not at this juncture, as you have spoken. We would typically, a bit like council, we would typically deal with the individual speaking and then continue on.
So, but I surely can, as a point of order, move a procedural motion at any time. There have been amendments moved by members who have moved motions.
I'm happy to take your procedural. It's very unusual. Your procedural motion is?
To defer the application, and I would, I understand that the city suggested a short period of time. I'm not quite sure as to what would be an appropriate period of time to put in the deferral application. Not that it may matter, but I'd perhaps suggest maybe 60 days if that is considered reasonable.
You will see that the city officers in their submission on the 13th of January had a commentary about a deferral. So you're wanting to move a deferral for period of up to 60 days
Yes.
for further discussion.
Yeah, around parking, public parking provision.
Public parking provision.
And ground floor tenancy parking.
Is there a seconder for the?
Yes, I'm very happy to second that.
As a procedural, we have the motion on the table. The mover obviously is the only speaker of it. To move it, did you have a comment that you're adding to that, or a member, have you provided sufficient clarity on your motion?
I will just make a comment. Look, I think having spoken against the amended recommendation, I think it would be probably unfortunate if it appeared that myself and perhaps Councillor Barber, if she feels the same way, were wholly opposed to the development in its totality. I think the particular concerns are around the parking, and I think it has been raised that there is potentially an opportunity for compromise between the city and the applicant, but it's very difficult to know what form that might take or how that might look, because there are concerns around private public bays and access requirements and with the bays and whatnot. So and at the same time, it's very difficult to simply, and I think it would be somewhat arbitrary to just pluck a number out of the air as to how many public parking bays we think should be provided without having regard to the building, access and whatnot for the parking area. So I think a deferral for a short period of time is probably the most appropriate way to deal with those concerns. So for the purposes of the minutes, I would like to move the deferral and have it noted that the intention was to try and move the deferral with a view to the parties reaching a compromise or negotiated outcome on the parking arrangements. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. As per the standing orders, with the procedural motion, there is no debate. The mover has spoken, provided the deferral details, the timeframe and the additional material that's subject to that deferral. It has been seconded. We are going, as per the provisions, direct to the vote. All those in favour? Against? It is lost. I have captured the motion as spoken about by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you for that. We move back to the agenda. The recommendation on the table is approval. If there are no other members that have spoken, I will speak to the motion for approval. I am supportive of this proposal. From my perspective, it aligns with the vision and objectives of the Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan. It provides, has already been indicated, a significant and complementary commercial land uses over this whole development, which has already been indicated is quite unique, with also interactive retail and food and beverage facilities creating a very positive street facade. It also incorporates design excellence. It's been through the DRP a number of times, with the final review undertaken by the chair, indicating that it meets the elements. It is considered to be an exemplar form of design and has reached and attained design excellence through that process. I believe the design will transform this intersection, as I've already indicated. Currently, it contains very low-rise car-dominated facilities, and this will be a substantial improvement and a positive to the centre. I note that the objectives that are contained under the Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan seek to achieve community interaction, minimise car-orientated activities, seek to improve the mix of land uses, create pedestrian-friendly activities along this area, and from my perspective, this development aligns directly with those objectives that are set out. Traffic movement has also been reviewed, considered both in parking access, and the city's report outlines that the on-site parking and servicing is suitable for the site, and there's been indication in relation to the adequacy of the number of bays on site relative to the development. The traffic impact assessment that's been provided also concludes that the development, in terms of its traffic supply and its parking supply and its traffic generation, is acceptable, including during peak hours. And I think the language used in that report is that it will have negligible impact on the road network and the operation of the intersection at Canning Highway and Sleep Road. Lots been discussed in relation to the height. From my perspective, has already been indicated. The proposal is marginally over on height when calculated as stories, being 16. However, the number of the overall height in terms of metres is obviously a much greater number. However, from my perspective, this proposal and this site is seeking a landmark building. Many facilities identify a landmark building to have additional elements, particularly in relation to overall height, that creates, both in terms of form and scale, a presence in the local community. From my perspective, it is very unusual to see a development of this nature seek to increase overall scale of building in terms of metres, but not increase the floor level. So I say that it is marginal overall in floor area, but a substantial increase for the overall identity of the building and it being a landmark within its site on that corner and generally in the precinct. I have given due regard to the submissions that have been raised in relation to this proposal, and I'm satisfied that the proposal is acceptable in the context of those concerns and the matters have been duly addressed as part of the design. Overall, I am supportive of this proposal and it is, as I already indicated, consistent with the objectives and most significantly providing a benefit to the broader community that will interact within this space. Those are my comments. I move back to the right of reply and close off.
Straight to the vote.
We are going straight to the vote, inclusive of the amendments. All those in favour? Against? It is carried 3-2 for the minute taker. I move back to the agenda. We have completed item 3. There are no item 4, there are no Form 2 DAP applications. We have no Section 31 SAT reconsiderations and accordingly I close today's meeting at 3:08 p.m. And thank everybody for your participation. I'd also like to thank the officers here for getting us back online as soon as it was available. Thank you, everybody, and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.